All right. I think I'm streaming. I don't know if this is going to work, and I'm not going to really worry about it a whole lot. So if it works, awesome. If not, oh well. But I thought I'd give it a whirl. Seems like I have everything in order. Seems like it should work. But we'll see if it does. So obviously this isn't the start of the show yet. Still getting set up a little bit here. But hey, if this is working and you want to come check this out live, feel free. Just gonna get some software ready here. This is something I would love to do with every episode. This was actually the patron goal that we hit a while ago, was to do this, was to live stream every episode. But I couldn't get it to work. It seems like I'm streaming. Cool. I couldn't get it to work. So I should stop uploading another video. I should probably stop doing that. Yeah, I couldn't get it to work. I was having technical difficulties. So instead I started doing the monthly live stream where we just talk about whatever. But then I realized a few days ago that I think this would work now. So I'm like, I'll try it. Maybe I can have my cake and eat it too. So yeah, so we're going to try it today. So I'm going to be recording episode 176, which is going to be a feedback episode. Might also have some micro topics. So you're going to get to see behind the curtain a little bit today how this show is made. Currently, it's been made a lot of different ways, different times. So I don't know how, I got a lot of stuff. I don't know how much of this I'll get through. So this might just be feedback. We might not get to the micro topics today. We'll see. I don't want to put out a 2-hour episode. So we'll see. And if we don't get to the micro topics today, then we'll just do it another time. Maybe for episode 177. So we'll see how far we get. And I just realized I didn't write an introduction. Stand by. So, okay. I think we're about ready. So yeah, you'll get to see how the the sausage is made. Yeah. So it's only recently that I've started doing the show in such a way that I could possibly stream it. So that's cool. All right, so I just need to minimize this. You know what? It's going to be hard to see the chat. Maybe in the future, I think I'm going to use the Discord for the chat when I do this. And a nice thing about Discord is it plays a sound when there's a chat message, which the chat for YouTube does not do. Or if it does, I don't know how to make it do it. So yeah, I think we're about to get ready. Man, I really need 2 monitors. I have to hook up another monitor. Yeah, I think we're ready. Let's do this. Let's quit screwing around and let's do this. All right. Actually, real quick, let's see. Is anyone watching? Nope, nobody's watching. It's probably good. All right. I think we're ready. Ready to start. Let me get a drink. All right. I think we're ready. Make a mark. yeah, let's do this. Move my water out of the way here. I feel nervous. Why do I feel nervous? I do this all the time. All right, let's go. Starwalker Studios presents Game Master's Journey, your multidimensional RPG podcast. Hello, fellow gamer. Welcome to episode 176 of Game Master's Journey. I'm your host, Lex Starwalker. On this show, we discuss the craft and the art of game mastery. I've been running RPGs for over 25 years now, and I produce this show in the hopes that you can benefit from my experience, my triumphs, and my mistakes. I've got another great show for you today. I'm going to discuss some feedback on recent topics from Listener-GMs like you. And if there's time later on in the show, there are also some micro topics that I would like to discuss. But before we get into feedback, just a couple quick announcements at the top of the show. I want to remind you that you can now get Game Master's Journey t-shirts from our store on Spreadshirts. We've got quite a few designs that my wife Nikki made, so you can check those out. You can find a link to our store over on Spreadshirt at starwalkerstudios.com/Game Master's Journey in the show notes. Also, we have a Discord server up and operational for Starwalker Studios. So you can get on there and chat with other listener GMs. And I have recently changed the configuration of that. So you no longer need permissions granted from me once you join the server to be able to interact with people and all that stuff. I've opened it up so anyone can join and get in there right away and talk to people and hang out. You don't have to wait for me to activate you or anything like that. Hopefully we won't have any problems with spam or anything like that. We'll just see how it goes. But so far I haven't had any problems at all. So hopefully we can do it this way. And then that way you don't have to wait on me to get in there and hang out. As time goes on, I will set up more rooms for the server, set up more roles, and we'll just expand the server as needed as it grows. But we've had some great discussions in there recently and had a lot of fun. And I am actually attempting to live stream this episode right now on YouTube. So the YouTube has its own chat that I'm going to use, which reminds me, I should get that up here so I can see it in case anybody chats at me. But YouTube has its own chat that it uses. But in the future, if I am able to live stream these episodes, if this works here today, I will probably use Discord instead of the YouTube chat, because Discord gives me a nice audio notification when there's a message. So I can know when someone's chatting at me during the show. But the hope is in the future to be able to live stream the episodes so that during the episode, through the chat, you can interact with me. And also through Discord, I can pull people in on voice to actually be on the episode with me for a minute or two, or maybe even longer. So hopefully this is something that's going to work and we can continue to do in the future. So you can find a link to the Discord server in the show notes at starwalkerstudios.com and go join us there. And finally, I have published a D&D adventure, The Trickster's Labyrinth, that you can find at starwalkerstudios.com/tricky. And I want to just really quickly thank everyone who's purchased copies. I'm not sure why, but in the last, 2 or 3 weeks, all of a sudden we've been selling more copies. Sold a lot in the beginning, and then it kind of tapered off, and now all of a sudden they're selling more again. I'm not sure why, but somehow the word is getting out, and that's awesome. I was really proud of the adventure. I had a lot of fun with it, and it was my first self-published RPG thing. So really curious to see how it goes, and I'd love to do more in the future. I've talked quite a bit on here about my D&D campaign I'm working on right now, Hinterlands of Elandria, and about how I've been creating a player's guide for that, which is up to like 44 pages now. It's getting ridiculous. But some of the people on our Google Plus community mentioned that they might be interested in checking that out if I were to publish that. So that's something I would definitely consider, and would definitely like to do if there's enough interest. If the interest is there, that'd be great. So I'd like to do more with Primordia and stuff in the future. There's all kinds of stuff I could publish if people are interested. So, this adventure with the Trickster's Labyrinth was kind of me dipping my toe in the water, see what kind of sales it generates, and is it worth the massive amount of time my wife and I put into it to do more things like this in the future, because I'd really like to. So, yeah, you can find that at starwalkerstudios.com. And you know what? That's really it as far as stuff at the beginning of the show. I really want to get going here into our main topic, or our first main topic, which is going to be feedback from you. All right, so my first bit of feedback that I want to talk about today is an email that I got from Listener-GMs Johnny, who is listening to the show in Brazil, which is awesome. Every once in a while, I get feedback or an email or something from a listener from another country other than the United States, which is where I'm at here in Bellingham, Washington. And it's always awesome to hear from people from other countries. It just amazes me that we're playing these games all over the world, and sometimes even the same games. A lot of people are playing D&D in other countries, and that this little podcast that I do is being listened to all over the world. It's really amazing and super cool. So I always love to hear from all my listeners, and especially listeners from other places. So if you do ever reach out to me, let me know where you're from. Even if you're from the U.S., I hear from people all over the U.S. So it's fun to hear where people are from. So Johnny wrote in, and he had a lot of really nice things to say about the show, which I appreciate, of course. And he also shared a story that I wanted to share with you today. And I got permission from Johnny to share this because it is a somewhat personal story. Well, it's a very personal story. But I thought it was a moving story, and I wanted to share it with you. So Johnny says, I played Pathfinder for 3 years during while he was at university for psychology, until one of the players went to France for a doctorate. This player came back this last January and wanted to run a game for them. So we started a new campaign in 5th edition D&D. We played a total of 3 sessions in this DM's world, this friend of his. His name was Masahiro Hattori. He is Brazilian and the son of Japanese immigrants. And he was a physician, a doctor, and a really smart and funny guy, and a great friend, a great player, and a great GM. He was engaged with a girl he dated since he was 16, which is awesome. And then it gets a lot less awesome. One afternoon, he was robbed at gunpoint on the streets of our city and shot in the head. Unfortunately, he passed away before reaching the hospital. This was a shock for all of us. We spent almost 2 months without talking about D&D. I myself had never DM'd before, but I came up with the idea to make one last tribute to him. I created a one-shot in a world where the five of us were gods, and another god, a human god, the purest of the men, was arising to heaven. All our previous characters were there, together with dragons, angels, and demons that came to praise him. This was around 4 hours of pure roleplay and tears from all of us. One of the greatest nights of my life so far. A couple days later, the players wanted to keep playing in that world, so I started developing the place for them, and so far they've faced werewolves, witches, and pirates, all in the name of Hattori, the god of virtue. I shared this with you because I have no other GMs that I'm friends with, and not many people knew him, but I would hate that for his name to be forgotten. He was a great friend and a harsh DM. Unfortunately, Brazil is not a safe country to live right now. Ironically, our city is named Porto Alegre. I hope I said that right. Happy, which means happy pier in English, but it is not happy at all. That's why I'm moving. Johnny is moving to England because our country doesn't give a fuck about the lives of its people. I would be honored if you could make his name be heard. Thus, he can be remembered. He was a citizen of the world, and I think this would be a nice tribute. So, yeah, absolutely, Johnny. I'm more than happy to share this story. And I know this is a show about gaming, and it's usually a pretty lighthearted, fun show, which is as it should be. But this really had an impact on me when I read this, and I thought it would be nice to share because we're all human beings listening to this show, as well as gamers. We're human beings that happen to be gamers, and it's so easy to take things for granted. Those of us that live in safe places in the world where we don't have to worry about being shot in the street, probably take that for granted. I know I do. We take our loved ones and our friends for granted, just assuming that they're going to be here tomorrow. But the truth is, nothing's for sure in this world, right? I don't know if I'm going to be here tomorrow. I assume I will be. I plan my day as if I will be here tomorrow, but I may not be. There's no guarantee. My loved ones, my friends may not be here tomorrow. So, I don't want to, dwell on this too much, but I thought it might be nice, not only to honor Johnny's friend, Masahiro Hattori, but also just as a reminder for all of us, not to take things for granted. And, God forbid, something horrible happens to anyone. But if it does, you'll be grateful that you appreciated what you had while you had it. So I know I definitely, like I said, I felt an impact from this, and I wanted to share it because it really made me think, about people that I take for granted, just in the sense that I take for granted that they're going to be there, that they're going to be there later today. They're going to be there tomorrow. I take for granted that I'm going to be here later today, and I'm going to be here tomorrow. But that may not be true. So I think it's good, at least from time to time, to remember that and to really appreciate the people around us, really appreciate our lives that we have, what we have, and not take it for granted, and not get so caught up in the more trivial things in life that we tend to get caught up in and get emotional about, get upset about, whether that's things that are going on in the world, things that are going on with your friends or your family, things that are going on in your game, things that that we get upset about. Not to say that we can't get upset about things, but it's just good to keep perspective and to remember at the end of the day what's really important. So, Johnny, thank you so much for your emails. I really appreciate it. And thank you listeners for listening to this brief diversion here from our normal gaming discussion. Just to take a minute to honor a fellow GM who is not with us anymore, who was taken from us tragically and violently, and just to take a minute to appreciate what we do have. And so thank you, Johnny, and kudos to you, sir, for taking this tragedy and finding a way to honor your friend, using this hobby that you all shared and loved. And it sounds really cool. Sounds really cool. And I think it's awesome that after you did this one shot, that the other players wanted to keep adventuring in this world, and now you're telling stories in this world where you have this deity who is honoring your friend who's moved on. That's really cool. What a great positive way to deal with the grief and start that healing process. So that's really cool. Thank you so much for sharing it with us. I also heard from listener GM Thomas, who says, "Hey Lex, I just wanted to let you know how much I enjoy your podcast, Game Master's Journey." Thank you, Thomas. I appreciate that. He says, "I want to tell you that listening to you has given me the inspiration to keep being a GM." Now, I want to share this today because I get quite a few emails and other forms of communication from listener GMs who are newer GMs who have just started GMing and who valued the show for helping them take the plunge and answering their questions and helping them feel like, this is something I can do, which is awesome. But this is the first email I've gotten in a while from someone who's saying that the show is helping them remain a GM. Thomas goes on to say, "I was pretty fed up with some of the groups I've been running games for over the last couple of years. So I went to just playing for a few months, trying to get re-energized, but I still didn't get my GM spark back. As a matter of fact, I was on the verge of just either giving the game up for a while or maybe altogether. I happened to stumble across your podcast one day and just started picking random episodes to listen to. I mow as a second job and spend about 5 to 8 hours a weekend in the summer mowing, so I was able to catch up on a lot of episodes fairly quickly." Now, just a quick aside here. This is not the first listener I've heard from who has mentioned that they listen to the show while they're mowing. And I just want to know, Thomas, or anyone else, how do you listen to the show while you're mowing? Do you have some super sick, noise canceling headphones or something? Because I tried listening to a podcast while I was mowing once, and I had to turn up my phone, my earbuds, all the way up so that I could even hear it over the sound of the mower. At which point, I was probably doing hearing damage, so decided not to do that. So I'm really curious how you guys are listening to podcasts while you're mowing. And if you have some super sweet noise canceling headphones, what are they? Because I'd be interested in them. Hopefully you're not just cranking the volume up so loud that you're hurting your ears. Because something I've unfortunately learned the hard way is that it's true, hearing damage is irreversible. I unfortunately listened to way too much, way too loud music when I was younger, and I pay for it now. And my wife pays for it because she always has to repeat things. What'd you say? All right. Anyway, getting back to Thomas's email here. Let's see. Where was I? Well, I tell you, Thomas says, "I really got hooked on the episodes going over the 5th edition Player's Handbook and then on your ideas about Primordia. Awesome. As for world building, I have found the Primordia content very inspirational, and it got me thinking. What if the magical apocalypse was still happening? Which in turn got me to start making a world where the rifts, or rips as I call them, are still popping up at random. Anyway, long story short, you really inspired me to start back into the GM side of the game. Also, I will be using some of the mechanics from the West Marches style play. Okay, before I get into that, that's awesome, Thomas. Thank you for sharing this with me. And that's super awesome that the show has gotten you charged up about GMing again. And, you know, GM burnout could be a topic, I'm sure, for an episode, or at least a micro topic that we cover quickly at some point. If you would like to hear an episode on GM burnout, shoot me an email, gamemastersjourney@gmail.com. I'd be happy to do one. But yeah, I mean, it happens to all of us, and there are so many different reasons. It can just be you've been running for a really long time and you need a break. Could be your players don't appreciate you, or you're having scheduling issues and you hardly ever get to play. Could be that you're just out of ideas. I mean, there's so many reasons that we can get burnt out. Sometimes it's just kind of a short-term thing where you just take a little break and you're good to go again. Sometimes it's more long-term, and sometimes, like Thomas, you need something to kind of reignite your creative flames again, whether that's a podcast or whatever. So I am so glad that I could help Thomas out with that. That's probably the coolest thing after hearing from new GMs who have decided to start GMing and are finding the show helpful as a new GM. That's really rewarding. And after that, probably hearing from GMs like Thomas who were maybe getting fed up or burnt out, and now they feel recharged and they're ready to go again. That's awesome too. And also hearing from people who get inspired to create their own worlds through the show. That's super awesome. That always makes me happy when I hear about that, because I feel like I'm doing something worthwhile here and not just blathering into a microphone for no good reason. So anyway, so Thomas goes on to talk about West Marches here. I lost my place. He says he's going to use some of the mechanics from the West Marches style of play to hopefully give my players some new and exciting gameplay. I find the content of your shows very helpful and interesting. I really like the community ideal and follow you on Google+. I'm pretty sure Thomas is in our community on Google+ too. A lot of really good content comes through there. Yeah, that's what he's talking about. With the mix of people who all enjoy D&D sharing their ideas. He says he started playing back in the mid-'80s, and he's seen a lot come and go as far as RPGs, and he's been pretty impressed with 5th edition so far and likes what Wizards has been doing. I've also been lucky enough to help playtest a game called Ultimate Hero for the last couple of years. You probably haven't heard of this game yet. Nope, I haven't until now, but you will. A couple of guys out of Kansas City developed it and have been running it at conventions for a while and should be releasing it pretty soon. That's pretty sweet. It's an RPG where the players are superheroes in a real world setting. It's really sweet. That's awesome. I just said that. It's hilarious. Anyway, I said that all just to give you a little info about me. Not trying to shamelessly plug any products. Well, that's all right. You know, Ultimate Hero. So check that out if you hear about it or see it at a convention. Sounds pretty cool, especially if you're into superheroes. Thomas goes on to say, at times I've listened to you talk about the content of your shows, and just recently I listened to the show about the live stream and how it wasn't really how you envisioned it. Oh, this is hilarious that I'm talking about this today, because I'm hopefully live streaming this right now. So I finally got it worked out. And hope that the patrons found it enjoyable. I want to reassure you that your fans, or at least me, really appreciate all you put into your productions and that you do it all with the listeners in mind. Well, thank you, Thomas. I look forward to every episode you put out, and I'm very pleased to see the live streams now making it to the podcast. Awesome. Yeah, I've heard from quite a few people who are happy that I put the live streams in the feed, because as I anticipated, not everyone can sit down and watch YouTube all day. So that's awesome. And I haven't heard from anyone who's annoyed that they're in the feed. So win-win. Let's see. So Thomas says with his work schedule, he hasn't been able to see the YouTube stuff, but hopes to at a later time. And he wants to let Nikki know that the shirts all look awesome, and he's looking forward to getting one or two in the near future. So I'll have to remember to tell Nikki that Thomas thinks her shirts look awesome. I think they look awesome too. I'm hoping that she can have time sometime in the future to do some more for me. So I hope you enjoy making the shows as much as I enjoy listening to them. Your show has led me to find a couple of other podcasts I like, but your show sets the bar pretty high in quality and content. Well, thank you, Thomas. I really appreciate that. I do enjoy making the show. There are times, I will admit, just like GMing, sometimes you get burnout GMing, sometimes you get burnout podcasting. And I think I've talked about on the show before how it's almost like this pendulum where I'll have a period of time where it's not so much I get tired of doing the show. I just start to feel like I'm running out of ideas of what to talk about. And then almost inevitably, at least so far, every time after that, like I have this time where I'm like, oh, I've got 5 more episodes, 6 more episodes, and then I don't know what I'm going to do. And then I'll go from that, the pendulum shifts, and then I've got so many ideas I don't know what to do with them. And that's where I'm at right now. I've got something like 20 episodes planned after this one already, and I come up with new ideas all the time. I've spoken with 2 or 3 people in the last couple of weeks that I want to interview on the show, which is above and beyond the 20 episodes I've already got planned. So right now I'm on the side of the shift where I feel like I'll never have time to do it all. Unless maybe if I did the show every day, I might have time to do everything I want to do. But yeah, it goes back and forth. So for the most part, though, I enjoyed doing the show. Sometimes it's just challenging coming up with new topics to talk about. So really great to hear that people appreciate it and enjoy it. I mean, I'm not going to lie, that definitely makes it more fun to do and kind of puts the wind back in my sails if I'm feeling a little discouraged. Hearing from people like Thomas and Johnny who enjoy the show and it means something to them. That's awesome. Definitely gets me fired up about it again. So finally, Thomas suggests a topic for the show. So this could be an episode or a micro topic that we talk about in the future. If you'd like to hear it, let me know. He says he'd really like to hear what people think about game mastering for pay. This seems like a hot topic in some of the groups I hang out with and has very strong opinions on both sides. So yeah, if you want to hear an episode or a segment about that, let me know, gamemastersjourney@gmail.com. Really quickly though, just right now, I'll tell you kind of what I think about it. I think it's honestly ridiculous that this is a hot topic with strong opinions on both sides. I mean, some people just need to get over themselves. If someone wants to provide a service, whatever that service it is, and there are people out there willing to pay for that service, whatever that service is, as long as it's not hurting anyone, I say go for it. And I say people should just shut the fuck up about it. I mean, really. I mean, it's like a perfect example of this is D&D Beyond. D&D Beyond is a service that's out there that costs money that someone is providing. Now, you may not feel that it's worth what they're charging for it. You may not feel it's worth anything, any money at all. And that's fine. You don't have to buy it. You don't, but it has nothing to do with you. It has nothing to do with me. Like, what do I care? If I look at D&D Beyond and I say, it's not worth the money to me, I'm not paying for that, which is basically what I said about D&D Beyond, then I don't pay for it and I don't care about it. Like, what do I care if 1,000 other people think D&D Beyond is worth the money and pays for it? I don't, like, what do I care? It's got nothing to do with me. So I really don't understand why people get up in arms and upset because someone's charging money to be a GM. If this person, whoever they are, finds players who are willing to pay them for their time to run games for them, then more power to them. What do we care? Now, I could understand if you're in the middle of a campaign and you go to the game session and the GM out of nowhere is like, hey guys, from now on, you got to pay me to do this. I could understand being a little disgruntled and being like, unhappy. But even then, even if that happened, which is not what's happening to most of these people that are all butthurt about it, I don't think. Even if that happens, it's like, well, that's that person's right. I mean, they're devoting their time to doing this thing. And if they want to charge you for it, that's their right. If you don't want to pay them for it and leave the game, that's your right. I don't understand people sometimes. It's like, don't people have better things to do than worry about what everybody else is doing that has nothing to do with you? So as far as my opinion, I think it's awesome. Running games is a lot of work and takes a lot of time. And running games well is even more work and takes even more time. And you see so much in the space these days, online and in other places. You see so many GMs talking about how to run a game with no prep time, and there are so many people who are trying to figure out ways that they can run games that are worth playing without putting any time into it. Now, some of these people, it's just because they don't have the time. Some of these people maybe are lazy. I don't know. We don't know people's motivations, but it's a thing you hear about a lot. Like how to run a game with less work and less prep and blah, 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 blah. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm all about efficiency. If there's a more efficient way to do something, I want to know it. If I am doing prep that I don't need to do, if I'm wasting my time, I want to know the better way to do it. But I don't think, what am I trying to say here? I'm getting all confused. What am I trying to say? What I'm trying to say is that I think there is a need for good quality GMs. May I even say professional GMs, because we have all these GMs out here who either don't have the time or don't have the desire to put in the time that's really needed to prepare a good game that their friends are really going to enjoy, and people will say, oh, I can run an awesome game with no prep. And maybe you can, but I'd be willing to bet you could run a more awesome game if you did some prep, right? And maybe your players are fine playing these games that you just come up with on the fly and don't prepare at all. In which case, awesome. I'm not going to tell people how to have fun, but there may be players who are like, I'm really tired of playing under GMs who just phone it in. They don't do any prep. They just pull everything out of their butt and there's no consistency, blah, 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 which it's not saying if you don't prep that's necessarily you. I'm just saying that there are, I think, many players out there who are unhappy with their GM for whatever reason, but one of those reasons could be that they don't put the time into it that they should, or the thought into it that they should. And those players are looking for someone to run a game for them, someone that's going to take it seriously, someone that's going to take it seriously enough, who is going to put in what the player feels should be put into a good game. And some people also are very limited as far as their schedule when they can play and when they can't. And some of that can be mitigated by playing online. And, there's a larger pool of players to pull from, or GMs to pull from if you're online. So you're more likely to find someone that can accommodate your schedule. But I know there are a lot of people out there who, for whatever reason, would be happy to pay for someone to run the game that they want to play, whether that's because they have GMs that phone it in and they want a GM who's serious about it, or whether that's because they just can't find a GM that can accommodate their schedule, or they can't find a GM in their area, or whatever the reason is. I know for a fact that there are people out there that are more than happy to pay for someone's time to run a game for them if it's worth it, if the experience is going to be what they're looking for. So the demand is there. And anytime there's demand, there's going to be someone come along to try to fill that demand. Now, I could understand people being upset and saying, I paid this GM X amount for a game and he phoned it in, or it wasn't very good, or whatever, or he didn't show up, or something like that. Like, I totally get that. But people being upset just that someone has the audacity to actually charge money for their time that they put into something that other people consider worthwhile, I don't get it. You get the same thing with podcasting. There are people that get all up in arms when a podcast has advertisements, or when a podcast has a Patreon that, God forbid, they talk about for a minute or two on the podcast. I occasionally get feedback from people or get reviews where they're complaining that I take 5 minutes to talk about the Patreon, thinking that, I should just put all this time into this and it's not cool for me to expect or ask for anything back from the listener, and guess how much concern I have for those reviews or comments. And like, whatever, you can think what you want, but it's a free country. I can do whatever the hell I want, as can these professional GMs. So personally, I don't feel like this is a conversation we even need to have. Should this be a thing? It is a thing. I think the conversation should be maybe what to look for. Like, if you're looking for a professional GM, what to look for, how to know if this is the right GM for you, or if you're thinking of becoming a professional GM, how to do that. I'd love to have both those conversations. I'd love to learn both of those things. For instance, I'm planning a campaign right now, and I am taking a lot of inspiration and a lot of techniques and whatnot from Wes Marches. I'm trying to make a very Wes Marches-esque campaign, but one of the aspects of a Wes Marches campaign that I'm not using is having the large pool of players, because the whole point of that, I think, is so that you can play more often. It's like, well, if we have more players and we can play whenever enough people are available and the GM's available, then theoretically we could play multiple times a week even, which I think would be awesome. I'd be all for that. The problem in my case is I don't have the time to run more than once a week, so I can't do that, although I would love to. So I'm setting my campaign up in such a way that I just have one group of players, and that's the way it is. However, I would love to have a large pool of players. I'd love to run D&D every day, but I just can't, because I have other responsibilities. I have other things I have to do. Now, if people were willing to pay me to run, and if they paid me enough, then I could run D&D more than once a week. I could run D&D every day. I could run D&D whenever people wanted me to, if they paid me enough, because then I could take that time from time at my jobs and say, well, I get paid X amount a week to run D&D. So now that's some hours I don't have to work doing other things. I can do this instead. So, me personally, I would be interested in it. If I felt the demand was there, if I had enough players willing to pay, I would totally do it. I'd be all over that. I think most GMs would. So I don't really understand even why, beyond the why are you upset about things that have nothing to do with you, just beyond that, I really don't understand why anybody would be upset about this, unless you're just upset because you don't think that you're a good enough GM that you could charge for it, and you're upset that other people are. But then that just comes back to why do you care? Why do you care what the other kids are doing, Billy? Just worry about yourself, Billy. Don't worry about what the other kids are doing. I mean, didn't everybody have that conversation with their mom like a million times? God, I know I did. So yeah, I'd love to talk about that more. Probably what I'd have to do is find someone who does this that I could talk to on the show about it, as far as how to go about it, because I don't know. I've never done it. And I do know of a few GMs who are charging. So maybe if it's something a lot of people are interested in, that's something we could look into, is having someone on the show to talk about that. All right. So I have some responses in the chat real quick. A response to my question about Lawn mowing. So there's a lawn mowing listener GM in the chat right now who says he uses an LG Bluetooth noise canceling headset. There you go. So it is a noise canceling headset. I suspected. I really hope people weren't going deaf out there. Yeah, cool. Let's see. DM Nell says, I wouldn't want to charge for games. It would change it from a fun pastime to a job. Expectations on the player side would change as well. I would take donations though. And yeah, and that's totally valid, DM Nell. But DM Nell, I'm guessing, isn't pissed off that other people are charging. You know, like, what do we care, right? And that's a really good point, DM Nell. Allow me as I tell a story from back in the day. I used to, when I was in college, I took trumpet lessons from a professional trumpet player. And something happened that's really stuck with me since then. This was a time in my life. There have been multiple times in my life I've considered being a professional musician. This was one of them. And this guy that I took lessons from was the principal chair trumpet player for the Philharmonic, the Fort Wayne Philharmonic in Indiana, where I lived. So he knew his stuff. He was a great teacher. I learned a lot from him. And yeah, I loved taking lessons from him. But anyway, we were getting towards the holidays, towards the winter break. And he was going on vacation, I think somewhere in Europe. I don't remember where. And we were just kind of chatting at the end of my lesson. And I just, without even thinking about it, just kind of off the cuff, I asked him, I'm like, oh, so are you taking your trumpet with you to Europe? Assuming that he would. Because at that time in my life, if I was going somewhere for 2 weeks, I would have taken my trumpet with me. I was like, I can't imagine not playing my trumpet for 2 weeks. I'd feel like I'd lost a limb or something. And just completely, like, just almost a rhetorical question, because I just assumed he'd be like, well, of course I'm taking my trumpet with me. I take my trumpet with me wherever I go. But he surprised me and he said, no. He said, I am not taking my trumpet with me because this is my job. Playing trumpet is my job. This is what I do for a living. I'm going on vacation. So I'm sure as hell not taking my trumpet with me. And that has, I mean, this was probably 10 years ago that I had this conversation, and it stuck with me. And I ask myself that now. Anytime I think about turning a hobby into something I'm going to do professionally, I ask myself, do I want this to become something I do for a job? Because that's a good point. Let's say people come out of the woodwork and want to pay me to run games for them. I start doing so, and I do it so much that that's my primary source of income now. Now being a GM has become a job. And that will affect the way I think about it, the way I approach it. And will I get to a point where if I'm on vacation, I don't want to run a game or maybe not even play a game because that's my job and I'm on vacation. I don't want to, quote, work on my vacation. So that's a really valid point, DM now. And I didn't even think about that in regards to this. So that's definitely something, if you're thinking about going down that path, think about how is this going to impact the way I approach the hobby, and am I going to be happy with that? If I end up thinking of GMing as a job, am I going to be okay with that? Or would I rather it just be my hobby, right? Because I can do a hobby on a vacation and not worry about it. So that's a good point, DM now. Yeah, and Jim also points out that it's the same kind of thing with bands when they start getting paid and then people call them sellouts. Who cares? Get money, get paid. Exactly. Yeah. Now the band thing I could maybe see if people feel like once they, quote, sold out, like they lost their artistic integrity and they went from like this interesting music that was its own thing to now it just sounds like mass-produced pop music. Like I could kind of see that, like they changed and not for the better. But with a GM, I mean, presumably if you start GMing professionally, if anything, you would improve, I would think, as a GM, because I mean, at least me personally, I would feel like if I was being paid to do it, I would set a higher standard for myself than I do just doing it for fun, running for my friends, which maybe that isn't the way it should be, but that is the way I think I would think about it. And so if anything, I'd think my GMing would improve and I'd devote more time to preparing. And honestly, if I was a professional GM, I would be going to local colleges. I would be taking classes on improvisational acting. I would take classes on like voice acting. You know, I would actually, just like any other thing you would do professionally, I would look to increase my skills. And since I'm getting income from this, I can justify actually paying money to take classes as opposed to now I'd like totally take an improv class if I could find one that was free or wasn't very expensive. But, you know, if it was like $100 or something, I'd be like, wow, I don't know if I can justify spending $100 on this right now. So yeah, I mean, I would think as a GM, becoming a pro would only improve things for the people that could afford to pay to be in your game. I think the only people that would lose out would be people that couldn't or wouldn't pay to be in your game. But you know, the professional GMs I have heard talk about it, they still run games for fun for their friends alongside doing it professionally. So I don't know. Yeah, I don't really get people being upset about it. Let's see what else we got here in chat. Yeah. So just Joshua says that he doesn't think he'd want to do it either for the same reason. Dylan says, I've always said that the DM can be bribed. Yeah. You know, bring me cookies and good things will happen to your character. Oh, DM Nell is a fellow trumpet player. Awesome. I've heard from a few trumpet players out there. Jim says everything knows it's all about the bass clarinet. Man, I love the bass clarinet. Just not in marching band. But yeah, I love the bass clarinet. I love the clarinet in jazz. Oh my, don't get me started. Anyway, yeah, this isn't a music podcast. All right. So that was Thomas's email. Check. Wow. Yeah, I don't think we're going to get the micro topics today. I think the feedback is going to keep us going today, especially now that we have people in the chat. So yeah, we'll do micro topics in a future episode, which is fine. I had a feeling that's what was going to happen. So I'm like all flustered now. I'm like, what's going on? So let me. All right. So I think it's time for a break. That's what we got to do. We got to do a break. Speaking of people complaining about me talking about Patreon, I can start talking about Patreon. You got to do what you got to do.
This is Matthew Colville, and you're listening to Game Master's Journey.
All right. And speaking of Matthew Colville, thank you so much, Matthew, for giving me that drop. I don't know if Matthew listens to this show or not. I'd like to think he does, but I know he is a very, very busy man. I follow him on Twitter and keep up on his YouTube channel. He's a very busy man. So if he doesn't listen to the show, I tell myself that it's because he's too busy and not because the show sucks. But anyway, I don't know if Matt listens to the show or not, but if he does, Matt, thank you so much for the drop. And thank you for coming on the show way back in episode 101. I've really got to have Matt on again if he'll come on again. Because I tell you what, I don't know if Matthew hears from anyone on his channel that finds his show through me, through Game Master's Journey. I sincerely hope so. But I, on a fairly regular basis, hear from people who find my show, Game Master's Journey, through Matthew Colville's YouTube channel. So hopefully it's a symbiotic thing, and I'm sending people to him as well. But I do know that I get a fairly regular flow of new listeners from Matthew Colville. I think probably because he mentioned that he was on the show. Because I hear from a lot of people who come and they listen to episode 101, and then they start listening to other episodes of the show. So thank you, Matthew, for that. And I sincerely hope that people are telling you. I'm sure that you're getting new viewers from me. I just hope that they're telling you so that you know. So if you do find Matthew's YouTube channel, which you should really check out, I will... Here, let me make a note to myself to link that in the show notes. I'll put that in the show notes. Oh my God, this is a long document. I will put that in the show notes over at starwalkerstudios.com. So you can go check out his YouTube channel. It's awesome. He makes video. It's very similar to the content of this show. Matthew, like I, wants to see more GMs out there. And so he makes videos for new GMs, trying to show you that it's not hard and you can do it too. And he's got great stuff. So definitely check out his channel. But anyway, I want to take a minute really quickly to give a quick shout out to the patrons of Starwalker Studios. Oh God, what did I just do? I just flung out my hand as I was gesturing and hit my mixing board. I hope I didn't screw anything up. I don't see any dials that look out of place. Anyway, thank you, patrons. The support of the patrons makes this show possible. If you enjoy Game Master's Journey and if you'd like to give a little back, becoming a patron is a great way, honestly, the best way to do so. It's because of the patrons that all the listeners enjoy a bonus episode every month and the live stream every month. So really 2 bonus episodes every month. And also now this live stream, which is hopefully still working, every month. So thank you, patrons. Thank you for that. And I also want to give a huge shout out and special recognition to my tier 5 patron, Steve. Let's hear it for Steve. Give it up for Steve. Yeah. Thanks, Steve.
Yes.
You the man.
Thank you so much, Steve. And thank you to all the patrons. You can find out more about becoming a patron by clicking on the Patreon button at the top of the show notes at starwalkerstudios.com/Game Master's Journey. All right, so continuing on with our feedback. This is just going to be a feedback episode. So I love hearing from my listeners and sharing listener feedback with everyone, because the listeners have a lot of great things to say. And, you know, there's more than just what I have to say, that's for sure. So I have some feedback on our recent West Marches topics. Heard from Jose Luis on the community over at Google+. And Jose, is it Jose or Jose Luis? I'm going to say Jose Luis because he had like 4 names. So I'm going to say it that way just to be safe. He says, I'm fascinated by the West Marches topic, and I'm planning to give it a try myself using 5th edition. There are some things that I'm wondering, so I thought I'd leave my thoughts. So he says, first, I wonder whether the suggestions for random encounters in the DMG require some tinkering, since these are probably designed for a different kind of campaign. So a typical traveling day assumes 8 hours of travel. And if one takes the strictest option, a random encounter roll every hour, this would give you 1 or 2 encounters each day of travel. Is this enough? I'm not sure. It partly depends on how far are your dungeons or other party objectives. How many days can a level 1 party travel without entering any danger zones for them? I guess this is as much an art as a science, and it also depends on how long you want your sessions to be. What do you think? So as far as the number of random encounters that you want to do while the PCs are exploring, I think it's totally up to you. And random encounters are really something that I find very useful because it's something that you can tweak. It's a little dial you can tweak while you're running the game. You decide as a GM, should I do a random encounter right now? Just ask yourself at any given time, would a random encounter or some kind of encounter, let's not call it random because it's kind of a loaded term, and depending how you do it, it may not be random. But would let's call it a non-story encounter. Would a non-story encounter enhance the game right now? There's a lot of reasons it would. There's a lot of reasons it wouldn't. It just depends on the situation. So the way I look at it, the way I approach it, and the way I'm going to approach it for my West Marches Inspire campaign is, I refer to hexes just as a term. I don't know that I'm actually going to use a bona fide hex map. I actually probably won't, since I'm using Theater of the Mind. And it's not like the PCs are going to have a hex map anyway. So for me to even refer to hexes to the players would just be confusing probably. So I probably shouldn't even use that term. But anyway, just for the sake of discussion, let's say I'm using a hex map or the equivalent. I would know what's in a given hex or what's in a given area. So I might have what I call set encounters, or you could call them story encounters, or whatever you want to call them. Encounters that I place on the map. Like in this hex, there's a goblin camp. In this hex, there's a giant sleeping on a hill or whatever. So these are things that are there, that I know are there, that if the players go to that spot, they're going to encounter that thing. So it's a set encounter. In my mind, what I call a random encounter or a non-set encounter or a non-story encounter is an encounter that isn't something like that, isn't something that I placed on the map, is something that is more, it's not necessarily tied to the story or a quest or anything like that. It's more something that the players encounter in the world just to give a sense of realism and have not every single encounter have to do directly with a quest or a storyline, because that would seem really contrived really quick. If every single encounter directly ties into something, it doesn't feel remotely realistic. So in my mind, those non-set encounters, what we often call random encounters, are above and beyond those encounters I've seeded the map with. So, let's assume you're using hexes, although I'm not going to use hexes, but just for the sake of discussion, let's say you're using hexes. Each hex is a mile. So I would say, as part of my design of my campaign area, a rule I would set for myself is every hex should have at least one encounter or interesting thing within it. I don't want to have a hex where just nothing, there's like nothing to talk about in that hex. So there's either going to be some kind of an encounter in that hex, or there's going to be something interesting that happens or that the PCs find. It could be a natural hazard, like a swarm of bees or something like that. It could be just something interesting, like a ruined statue or whatever. It doesn't have to be a bona fide encounter where they have to fight something or interact with something. It could just be an interesting feature of the landscape that I can describe when they're in that area. So each hex, I either want an encounter or at least something interesting to talk about in that area. So presumably, when the PCs enter that hex or they move through it, they're going to find the thing that I put there, whether it's just an interesting thing that I describe or it's an actual encounter, they're going to find that. So the quote random encounters or the non-set encounters are above and beyond those. So to me, the biggest thing that helps me decide whether or not to do a random encounter, a non-set encounter, I don't want to call it random because some people have a negative reaction to the word random, and there's nothing about what we're talking about that says it has to be random. You can do the same thing with a non-random encounter, something you cooked up ahead of time, but it doesn't tie into a story or a quest. It's just something, quote, random that happens, even though it's not really random, right? Do you get me? So I'll call it a non-set encounter, an encounter that is not tied to a specific time or a specific place or both. So when deciding whether or not to use one of those, to me, it's all about pacing. So let's say they're in a given area or a given hex, if you will. And the interesting thing in that hex is a ruined statue, but that's it. It's just a ruined statue. It doesn't breathe fire on the PCs. There's nothing hidden under it, you know. Now, that could be something where the PC sees the statue and they spend a bunch of time examining it and looking for traps and seeing if something's buried under it, trying to figure out if it points at something important. And they spend a lot of time with it. And I'm like, okay, that's enough for this hex or this area, or I'm ready to go on to the next thing. So in that case, I wouldn't do a non-set encounter because there's no need for it. And if anything, it would hurt things. It wouldn't improve things. If, on the other hand, maybe the PCs travel through that area, they see the statue, I describe it, and they're like, oh, that's cool. And they go on. Then I might think, well, you know, it's been a while since anything interesting happened. The players haven't gotten to roll any dice for a while. They're looking kind of bored. So I'm going to do an encounter. Just, again, for pacing, because the pacing needs it. We need something to happen. So to me, that's the number one thing. And that is something I decide on the fly during the game is, do I need an encounter for the pacing? Is it, you know, are they taking too long in this spot investigating something and people are getting bored? I can have something run in and attack them or something happen. Or is there just been a long time and nothing interesting has happened? Or do I need something to happen, for instance, in Primordia, to impress the danger of the setting? So I talked before about how in the beginning of my campaign I'm going to run, I'm going to have the players travel from Alondria, the city, to the adventure area, which is a few days away. And to have that go by uneventfully would be undermining my setting, which is supposed to be super dangerous. And if I tell you, you traveled for 3 days through wilderness and nothing interesting happened, that's not a dangerous setting, right? Like, you'd think, you know, it would be this harrowing tale of death-defying feats and whatnot, right? So, you know, because of the setting I want to convey, because of the tone I want to convey, I need to have some encounters during that journey to show the players and show the characters that, yeah, it really is dangerous out here. It's not just something people say. So that's another thing you can use them for, is to up tension, impress danger, and things like that. I mean, there's a million things you can use these encounters for to get information to the players. Like, maybe you want the players to know that there are goblins in the area, so you can have an encounter with goblins, or you can have them find goblin tracks or whatever. Let's see. Let me look to my notes here. So yeah, me personally, I seldom rely on a random roll to determine whether an encounter happens. I don't often do the thing of, I roll a d20 every hour, and if I roll a 20, it's an encounter. I usually don't do that. Instead, I use an encounter, what we might call a random encounter, a non-set encounter, when I feel it's needed, when I feel it's going to add fun, whatever that reason may be. Again, it could be a pacing thing. I think players are bored. It could be maybe the players are taking forever to make a decision of what to do next, so I'm going to spur them on. Like, now you have to make a decision because the bridge is collapsing or whatever. It could just be due to something the players do. I think, oh, they're making way too much noise traveling through this forest. Surely something hears them and comes to investigate. So me personally, I would recommend not worrying about how many encounters per hour or anything like that, or making rolls or anything like that. Just do what seems dramatically appropriate to you as a GM. If, on the other hand, you don't want to do that and you want it to be random and you want to roll, you can do that, and you can just adjust the likelihood of the encounter happening based on how dangerous the area is or how likely you think an encounter is. So maybe in an area that's fairly settled and fairly safe, you might say, oh, there's only a 5% chance an hour that they have a random encounter. So that would be a roll of a 20 on a D20. In a more dangerous area, you might say there's as much as a 50% chance. So if I roll 11 or higher onto D20, there's an encounter for that hour. So really, I don't know if this is an answer that's gonna satisfy Jose Luis, but really it depends. And it's something that I just do on the fly during play, and I decide in the moment during the game whether to use an encounter or not. And what I personally usually do is I come up with, quote, random encounters ahead of time. I come up with encounters ahead of time that I can kind of put anywhere. So for instance, player characters exploring a wilderness, I have an encounter table for that area that I've created that tells me what's in there. So I could either roll on that table or I could pick some encounters from it I like. I kind of work them up ahead of time. How many goblins are there? Are they riding wolves or not? How are they armed? What kind of treasure do they have? All that kind of stuff. What kind of tactics will they use? I come up with all that ahead of time, put it on a note card, and literally sometimes have it in my back pocket. And then I use it whenever I need it. I could use it this week. I could use it next week. I could never use it, or I could use it a year from now. But I have that encounter and I use it when I feel like it's the time to use it. And then once I've used it, I've used that one and I don't use it again. And usually for a given session, I'll have anywhere from 3 to 5 of those encounters that I think will fit in that session. And if I feel like I need an encounter, I look at where the players are, what's going on. I look at my encounters I've created and I think which is the one that would fit best or which is the one I want to use right now. And then that's what I do. And a lot of times what I'll do even for the encounter when I write it up on the note card is I'll have a little bit of how do I present this encounter if it's during the day and the player characters are traveling, and then how do I present it if it's at night and they're in camp. So during the day, it's an encounter where you kind of bump into each other, where at night it's an encounter where this thing's probably going to try to ambush them in their camp, or not ambush them. I guess that wouldn't be the right word, but it's going to attack them while they're sleeping kind of thing. So sometimes I'll write different descriptions for each of those if I have the time. So let's see, what else did I say here? Yeah, so I guess I kind of already said this, but not only like for my campaign, not only am I making different tables for different areas, but the likelihood of an encounter happening is going to change. So for instance, right around the village, the likelihood will be lower, maybe only a 20 or a 19 or 20 or a 5 or a 10% chance if you use percentile for an encounter in any given hour. But as you get deeper into the wilds, it might be a 20% chance, or there might be some places that are really dangerous and it's a 50% chance or whatever. But again, a lot of times I use that percentage as a guide to how many encounters to do, as opposed to actually rolling that for every hour to see if one happens. So, you can definitely run your game how you want and you can just let the dice aside and let it be random. But I've found through my experience that you get better stories, you get better pacing in your gaming session if you as a GM use your brain and make decisions instead of just letting randomness decide if or when there's an encounter and what it is. You decide what would work best, what's going to make the session the best that it can be. Yeah. So yeah, that's basically it. So let's get back to Jose Luis's message here. He says, second, I have my doubts about the competition factor between players. Again, talking about the West Marches campaign style. I get it that it's a great motivator, but I'm specifically wondering whether this would encourage players to avoid giving up too much information to the rest of the heroes. Now, this is a good point. Imagine that we found a dragon's lair in one of our expeditions, but we're not yet big enough level or high enough level for it. What if I just omit that little detail and continuing leveling up until I get powerful enough and then I go kill the dragon myself? It doesn't sound so crazy to me that someone might think of that. How would one prevent this kind of bad sportsmanship without giving away too much information as a DM? Yeah, this is a great thing to spell out in the beginning. So however you do it, whether you have a session 0 and you sit down and tell the players, or you have a player's guide and you do it there, you have a forum and you do it there. I would definitely, if I were running a true West Marches campaign where we had the pool players and we have the competition among the players, I would say one of the rules of this campaign that you agree to by playing in the campaign is that you will share truthfully what you encounter. Part of the agreement players make to play in this campaign is that they're going to write the after adventure reports on the forum. And part of that agreement is also that those reports will be truthful, accurate, and complete. This whole leaving things out so that other players don't know about it, so that you can keep it to yourself, would not fly, would be against the rules. And I would just spell that out and say, this is the kind of thing, like, if this happens, I'm not going to be happy, and I'll probably say something to you. And if it ever happens again, you're just going to be out of the campaign because you're breaking the rules. You're breaking the social contract or the actual literal contract, whatever the case may be. And yeah, I would just establish that ahead of time and then make sure and follow up and enforce that. Don't let that happen. Cause yeah, that totally undermines the whole, what you're trying to do with this kind of campaign. And yeah. So, Jose Luis also says in a later comment, he says, at some point, or this is one of the later episodes in the series, I think, he says, you mentioned that for you, this would work better with Theater of the Mind. However, Ben Robbins, who is the guy that coined West Marches, seems to think that the battle map of 3rd edition made all this possible, and that he would have had a difficult time trying to do this with AD&D, since there were a lot of judgment calls required in that kind of game. So this would make the DM's role less impartial and conflict with the objective of having the players hate the world and not the DM. So he's basically asking, like how do you handle this, right? And what he's talking about here is one of the things Ben Robbins talked about in his blog post was one of the things he really liked about this campaign that he ran was that as a GM, he felt more impartial because he rolled in front of the screens. So the player saw what he rolled. So there was no fudging involved. And he also was very strict about, he had his map with encounters placed on the map that were there. And he had his random encounter tables that he literally rolled on for encounters. And it was all very transparent. I don't think he showed the players the tables, but I think he had the players roll, so he was doing the random encounters truly randomly and letting the dice decide. And he liked that, all these things kind of together, because he felt it helped him feel more impartial and be seen as impartial by the players. And he saw that as a good thing. And he felt that having a battle map with miniatures facilitated that, because with Theater of the Mind, there are a lot of judgment calls that the GM makes, and that might undermine this sense of the GM being completely unbiased. But personally, I don't find that to be a fundamental part of what the West Marches is. I think that was something that a specific GM, Ben Robbins, liked about the way he ran this kind of campaign, which I understand he's the one that came up with this. But I mean, we're all our own GMs. We're our own creative people. We can do our campaigns however we want. We don't have to follow Ben Robbins' recipe down the line. We can do it however we want. So I would argue that feeling of impartiality that he had because of rolling in the open, because of doing, keeping to those tables and only rolling on the tables and only using what the dice rolled, was particular to that particular GM, and is not one of the things that I think at least makes the West Marches cool. I think you can have a West Marches without that and it'd be just as cool. It's still going to be West Marches. Personally, I don't need that to know I'm impartial as a DM. I don't need to roll all my dice in the open. I don't need to be a slave to the encounter tables I've created to feel like I'm fair as a DM, and for my players to feel like I'm fair. If you need that, or if you feel like you need that, I'd first challenge you to consider that you don't need that and it's in your head. And that's kind of a crutch that it'd be better if you could learn to GM without that crutch. But if you truly feel that you need that to be impartial, then more power to you. Run your game how you want. But I don't think that I don't think you have to roll in the open for West Marches. I don't think you have to be a slave to your encounter tables for West Marches. Also, I disagree that Theater of the Mind necessarily will make you seem less impartial or less fair as a GM. No matter how you run the game, whether you do Theater of the Mind, whether you use maps and minis, or you use a combination, as a DM, you make judgment calls all the time. That's just part of being a GM. So maybe if you're using Theater of the Mind, you're doing more judgment calls. I would challenge that. I wouldn't just buy that. I want to see proof of that because I don't buy it, but it's possible maybe. But even if so, it's not like as using map and minis, you're making no judgment calls. In Theater of the Mind, you're making a ton of judgment calls. The difference is not that big of a difference. Not to the point that the same GM using Theater of the Mind is going to seem less impartial or fair than if they used the map and minis. I don't buy that. I don't think that's true. So this I think is more about your personal style of the GM really than about West Marches. So, if you want to use grid and minis, go for it. I think your West Marches campaign will be fine. If you want to use Theater of the Mind, go for it. I think your West Marches campaign will be fine. It really comes down to what you want to do as a GM and what works best for you. I don't think you really have to worry about, since I'm doing West Marches, I have to use a map and mini. You don't. Or I have to roll my dice in the open. You don't. I don't think so. And finally, as far as the West Marches feedback, I just want to let you know that listener GM Floyd made a nice post on the community about how he set up a West Marches campaign that he ran or is running. I don't remember, online. So I'll put a link to that in the show notes as well at starwalkerstudios.com. So you can check that out and see how he set his up if you're interested in running online. It might be helpful to you. All right, really quickly, going to glance at the chat again. Okay, so Joshua asks, referring to our West Marches we were just talking about, how do you handle players misremembering or drawing a bad map if you require them to be fully truthful in their report? It's not a problem. There's a difference between a player making an honest mistake and drawing the map wrong, or forgetting to mention something in the after adventure report. There's a big difference between that and the player intentionally leaving out information in order to try to manipulate kind of the metagame of the campaign so that their group or their character can go do this thing and they don't want the other player characters to know. First of all, ideally, it's not just one player from the group who's involved in the after adventure report. All the players should be involved. Maybe they don't all write, long paragraphs, but let's say you've got 4 players. Player number 1 writes the after adventure report. The other 3 players should read that. And if there's something missing or something wrong or something they want to argue, then they should respond to the post and be like, oh, you forgot about this thing that happened. Or, oh, actually, that's not how that happened. It happened like this. So, anything that's missed, that's legitimately, honestly missed with no, ulterior intentions or motives, should be handled in that way. And otherwise, I think as a GM, you'll be able to tell, right? I think you'll be able to tell the difference between an honest mistake and someone who's trying to game the system. And the first is fine. We all make mistakes. The second is not cool. Let's see. Yeah, so Josh says, I think part of the West Marches idea is that the player maps are not going to be completely accurate, and that's just one of the hazards the players face in the game. Exactly. And again, there's a big difference between, not having the entrance to the dungeon in the exact right place on the map and not putting it on the map at all because you don't want anyone else to know about the dungeon, right? There's a huge difference there. And as a GM, it's not going to be hard to tell the difference, right? So I think you can handle that. Yeah. So, if they draw the dungeon wrong, that's one thing. If they completely don't put the dungeon there, that's something else. But yeah, as Josh is saying, it's a judgment call, as a GM. But honestly, compared with a lot of the judgment calls you make during play, I think this one's going to be fairly easy. And maybe the first time it happens, you give the player the benefit of the doubt. Like I said, I would give them a warning. I would say, hey, you left out this thing. You're not allowed to do that. If it's an honest mistake, that's fine. Just fix it. But, if you're trying to game the system so that other people can't get this loot you want, like that's not cool. And that's against the rules. And if you do it again, you're out, So if the same player keeps making the same mistake, I'd be kind of wondering, right? So yeah, I think you can mitigate that. All right. Well, that is all the comments. Hey, Gallifrey. And so it looks like the live stream worked. People are watching, and I didn't completely fall apart doing the show today. So yeah, maybe this is something we can continue to do in the future. So yeah, let me see. Yeah, so I didn't get to the micro topics today. So in a future episode, I will cover those. But I did get through pretty much all the feedback I wanted to cover today, which is awesome because it's been piling up. So thank you, everyone, for all your feedback. Keep it coming. It's great to hear from you. All right, well, that's going to wrap it up for episode 176 of Game Master's Journey. Hope you enjoyed the show today, and it was fun to do a feedback episode. I haven't done one of these in a while, and we'll do more in the future as I get more feedback. Speaking of feedback, if you'd like to get a hold of me, you can go to the website, starwalkerstudios.com. And there are lots of great ways you can find to get a hold of me there. You can email me. You can follow me on Twitter, Google+, Facebook, Pinterest, YouTube. I have a YouTube channel. You can find my D&D adventure, The Trickster's Labyrinth there. You can find a link to our store on Spreadshirt where you can get a Game Master's Journey t-shirt. You can find our voicemail number, which I thought I had that in here because I'm like, I should tell people the voicemail number because I don't get a lot of voicemails. So that number is 951 GMJ Lex 1. That's 951-465-5391. And you can call my voicemail. You can leave me a message, and I would love to hear from you. And if your message is interesting or enlightening or entertaining, you might even hear it on the show. I'd love to play your message on the show. So if you have any questions, feedback, suggestions for future topics, I'd love to hear from you. You can also find a link to the Game Master's Journey community where you can share your ideas with other listener GMs. You can also find a link to our Discord server where you can also hang out with other listener GMs. And finally, you can learn how you can support the show. There are a lot of great ways you can support the show. So many, it's a pain to list them off. You can become a patron. You can make a one-time donation on the website. You can use my Amazon referral link when you shop on Amazon. You can get yourself a t-shirt. You can get my D&D adventure. Yeah, you can leave a review. So you can find all this and more on the website, starwalkerstudios.com. If you go to starwalkerstudios.com/support, you can find information about all the ways you can support the show. So yeah, that's going to wrap it up for episode 176. I feel like there's something else. Oh, yes. So I live streamed this episode. So I don't know how well this is going to work. I'm going to try to do this from now on. And yeah, unfortunately, it's kind of in the air when I record, so I can't give you warning. So, but I'll let people know in our Discord server, and I'll let people know in the Google community when I start recording, if people want to come watch the live stream. For today, we were using YouTube has their own chat, which we were using. But if I'm able to keep doing this, we'll probably move to using Discord for the chat, just because it's a more functional chat app for text chat. And also because if I have time and if I want to, I can actually bring people on the show using Discord, which would be super cool. So, yeah. Let me just check. Wow, we got more comments. Okay, just people saying that they had fun. So yeah, you can, for now it'll be the YouTube chat, but you can come hang out live while I record the show. And so yeah, now I'm going to edit this, which hopefully won't take too long because I try to do the show live to hard drive now. And so it shouldn't hopefully be too long, get the episode uploaded. And yeah. But I guess if you watch live, you get to see it a little sooner. But then you get to see all the screw ups that I edit out. So I don't know. I don't know if that's a boon or a flaw. I'm not sure. But yeah, so that is going to wrap it up for me for this week. I hope that you have a chance to play your favorite RPG this week. I hope you have a chance to run your favorite RPG. Even better. I'll be back soon with another episode of Game Master's Journey. Until then, game on. And yeah, I totally screwed that up. It's okay. I rolled a 1.
This has been a Starwalker Studios production, your source for quality gaming and hobby podcasts.
This episode's music, courtesy of Cloudwalker, Transboy, Renfield, Stanko, and Ish. See the show notes for more details at starwalkerstudios.com/GameMastersJourney.